Welcome, welcome, and thank you for joining us for another episode of Social Workers in Policy. We are here to explore non-traditional roles that allow social workers to elevate their impact to the systems level. I'm your host, Melissa Winarowski, and fellow policy social worker. We are here to discuss a wide variety of careers that social workers have found in non-traditional settings at the macro and policy levels. This could be academics, government, nonprofits, corporate, technology, philanthropy, and more. We are here to illuminate the path for those of you who may want to move your career to the systems level and are actively seeking to figure out what are your next steps to be able to get there. For today's episode, I'm going to introduce you to Christina Rosales. After spending a brief period in philanthropy following the completion of her MSW degree, Christina has built a career in fair and affordable housing policy. She is currently the Housing and Land Justice Director at Power Switch Action, and she's going to share a bit about her journey and how she got there with you all today. Christina's bio is in the show notes below, so if you want to read more, you can check it out there. Like and subscribe to make sure that you don't miss out on future episodes. And if you really want to stay connected, you can get updates directly sent to your inbox by joining the email list, which is also in the show notes below. In addition to this channel, we are putting together some other exciting resources to help social workers who want to transition into policy work. So follow along and stick with us if you want to be part of that too. In the meantime, we will jump right into it and meet Christina. So I just like to start out by hearing a little bit about your journey, where you were when you first got out of grad school and how that's evolved to where you are now.
So when I graduated with my master's in social work, I already knew that I would not be no, I would not be a clinician. I did start graduate school with the intention of becoming a clinician, a family therapist, um, and shifted sort of throughout the coursework. It was pretty clear to me that and I was fortunate to have the clinical field placement my first year of graduate school, where I tried it out and I thought, like, this is not like my best and highest use. Um, and so I switched gears and said, like, I'm gonna continue with the macro track. And I took policy classes, I took economics classes, and then I took classes outside of the social work school, and with the law school and the policy school at the University of Chicago. Um, so I had a pretty good understanding of what I felt I was sort of called to do. And when I left graduate school, I had a job in philanthropy. Um, and I worked at a big foundation, um, as a program assistant, which is kind of like in philanthropy, it's like the first level, um, before you become a program officer, a program associate. Um, and I was a program assistant for a policy reform and advocacy team, and it was squarely about kids and families. So I did that for a year and also felt, okay, I tried this and I learned a ton because there's this really beautiful piece of philanthropy where you're a convener. So you're funding people to do amazing work around, in my case, policy and advocacy and uh, and family well-being, that I felt like, okay, I know enough about what's out there, and the thing that I care most about is families and housing. So I was able to pursue that a year after graduating, and stuck with that, and that's kind of where I'm at now. I've had a few different roles, but um, housing advocacy and organizing and power building has been my main focus. I mean, I think there was a lot of things. The clinical work at my field placement was, and I think a lot of people who are doing first year field placements can relate to this, is like, it didn't feel like I had a lot of agency or control over how things were done. I also had to take a macro class at the same time. And what I appreciated about macro work was sort of like understanding why programs are designed the way they are, like the intentional choices and the unintended consequences of those choices. And I was like, wow, that's actually more interesting to me, because then designing programs, evaluating them, changing them, like that is where I wanted to be. Um, and it was just so clear having the clinical practice and then a sort of the macro coursework to help me realize that. I went to a conference, I think, um, as part of this foundation, there was a lot of like convening, a lot of networking with other foundations and with other and with grantees. It was very process oriented, and something I know about myself is I am not a process oriented person. I'm like I set a vision, I have like a big vision for things, and I can get enough into the process to make it happen, but I'm not about like the grant reports and the grant reporting, the compliance, that like all of that stuff is so essential when you're in philanthropy. Um, and that also was very clearly not for me, but I learned so much about finance and compliance and organizational development, which I still use. I like still take so much of those lessons into like my current role. Something that I think is really interesting is when you graduate with a degree in social work, if you are on the job hunt, if you're like, I want to find a job that is reflective of this graduate degree that I earned, like if you're not into clinical work, like you're not really going to find something that's like screams out to you, this is a social work job for macro social workers. Like that's not really how I, ended up on this path. It took a little bit of reflection and sort of thinking more. It's like, it's not about me being a social worker, it's about me having the skills necessary. So it's like, it's almost like translating what I know, what I learned, also my own background. Like I came in also having made a career change. I was a newspaper reporter before starting graduate school. So I had this sort of background I also felt really strongly was useful in addition to the social work coursework. And when I looked for jobs, like even in graduate school, as I was thinking, like I want to do macro work, it felt very unclear what the path was. Um, and so understanding the skills that I already brought and seeing how they match up with what's out there, like that was sort of like turning the key and being like, oh, I don't have to just find a social work job. I have to make sure that I understand what I can bring and what I actually want to be doing, right? Like I didn't really want to be at a nonprofit doing therapy. I wanted to be in a policy setting. One of the main things that I think was helpful was having two field placements. So having a clinical field placement and then having a policy macro field placement. And so like in the clinical setting, I was doing group therapy, family therapy, and um, and kind of creating materials for people to have to like build their self-awareness, like doing a training and a small group training for people to build their own like coping mechanisms and stuff like that, coping skills. Um, and so when I was like looking for jobs, there were things like being able to facilitate a meeting effectively. It was like, well, I can do that. I know how to keep people engaged. I know how to make interactive activities and discussions. So that will be really helpful for like sort of making that connection. Another skill that I saw all the time was writing reports and synthesizing information. It's like, well, my field placement at the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights, like that's what I did. So it was really easy. That one was really easy. If I wanted to do policy, it was like that translated perfectly. But some of the clinical skills, I think people don't appreciate how well you might learn some like essential skills, and even not just macro policy jobs, but like just plain old working, being a functioning adult in the workplace. So like having skills for self-regulation, self-reflection is like everybody has experienced that moment in a job where they are really frustrated, where they're having a hard time with either a client, a coworker, a supervisor. Like I experienced all of those things in my clinical setting that I was like, I worked through that. I had um, like a clinical supervisor through the social work school who helped me practice self-reflection, practicing agency and uh, like self-awareness and like courageous conversations that easily translated to all of the workplaces I've had. And so I think it's like I think we can translate so many skills that no one really tells you about. But if you can learn self-awareness and self-reflection in the context of your social work education, like you have the skills it takes to translate the other things that you do into a job.
What were some of the biggest challenges that you faced in making that shift? So we talked a little bit about just sort of the stereotype of the MSW, meaning that you're a clinician. Any other big challenges that you faced as you worked through making that shift?
Um, I think just like navigating what you call yourself. I think, in American careers, we gain so much identity from what we do and this training we come from. And I think I was a journalist before, and there's certainly like high identification with the job. Like that is who you are. And I think social work is also very similar, where people identify highly as social workers. And that it's like not just about the stereotype, but it's also about like what you believe about yourself. Um, that is like a self-limiting belief, where it's like, oh, I can't do research. I'm a social worker, like I'm not a researcher. It's like, well, how many times have you had to research things for your clients? For how many times have you had to research systems to help your like clients navigate that? Like that's research. It's important and it translates, right? Um, or seeing like, so I work a lot in organizing now, and people have this belief that social workers are just kind of like touchy feely, not rigorous um, vibe, or that it's like really like paternalistic, like social workers are always trying to get people to like take treatments that they don't want or whatever. There's a lot of things, and um, I have had to learn like I'm not just a social worker, even though that is my training. Like I have developed the rigor to like meaningfully advocate, meaningfully organize. And I'm not just here to talk about feelings, even though I'm predominantly like that's the thing that I gravitate toward. I at the same time contain the skills to understand hard things and to deal with hard people who don't respond to like feelings, but more sort of like process and facts and research. Um, yeah, and I also have a strong analysis of like power, where my current role and the last couple of roles I've had rely so much on understanding power dynamics and power mapping within systems. like I can do that, and that is part of the this education training and analysis that I built through social work. So currently, I'm housing and land justice director at a national nonprofit called Power Switch Action. Um, we are a national network of 21 affiliates across the country. Most of these affiliates are community and labor partnerships, so they work closely with labor unions, but they also have like a robust community presence. So they have members, either like tenant-based memberships or worker members, and they sort of span from coast to coast. So it's like in California, there's a group of like a farm worker membership base, and in Colorado, there's a tenant membership base. And in Boston, it's like childcare worker membership base. And then at the same time, like lots of coalition organizers, which is something that I came from doing housing work in Texas. Um, I'm the housing and land justice director, which means that um, I run housing campaigns. So some of our affiliates have worked really hard on rent control and renter protections, uh, progressive revenue sources for housing. My job is to help them conceive of campaigns and run campaigns that helps them win things in housing and land justice. So I've done that for 4 years now, and yeah, and I kind of think of it as it's a little bit of consulting work with local campaigning groups, local community groups and labor alliances, but it's also a little bit of organizing and research and lots of other things. Yeah, I think I'll walk you through sort of a week because a day to day is so different. But one week might consist of I'm like kind of embedded in a Chicago coalition for social housing. So I am, attending their coalition meeting where they might have questions about, well, how does the financing for this work? What do we need to know about what our demands are? I'm there because I've worked with groups all around the country. I'm there to sort of say, well, here's a financing model that I've seen. Here's some of the challenges and limitations. And then at the same time, they might be having an organizing discussion where they're like, well, how do we get more people in our base? It's like, well, let's talk about nonprofit housing providers. Like, have you had any coalition meetings with them? Have you done a listening conversation? So we're navigating different strategies for organizing as well as some of the like subject matter expertise that they are looking for. On another day, I might be writing up some training materials for our Oakland affiliate, where they've been doing a leadership institute for tenants that they're trying to develop as leaders. Um, so I'm saying, okay, well let's do a module on courageous conversations where maybe there's been some turmoil, there's been some tough stuff with this group. How do we break through? How do we have some conversations so that folks can get beyond the conflict and move in a generative way? So I might be doing that, another day. Um, we have a multidisciplinary team. So we have researchers, organizers, we have like operations and finance people. We have a legal team, and then we have the campaigns team. So another day I might be meeting with this group and saying like, all right, so here's the layout of what we have going on in all of these campaigns. What are some of the things that we need to achieve these goals? Like what kinds of financing do we need? What do we need to know about grants that we have that we can actually subgrant to all of our affiliates so that they can get their campaigns done? What kinds of like compliance training do these folks need to have so that they can protect their C3 status in a moment, in a moment in this government, right? Um, what are some of the vulnerabilities that we need to talk about as far as like legal compliance? Um, and then communications, like what kinds of stories are out there that we need to understand, and how are we like messaging about the human right to housing? How can we like leverage this moment to tell our story? Um, yeah, and then other days might be more, kind of more like digesting, reading, under, strategizing. A lot of it seems like a lot of what I do is digesting information for folks and helping them understand it easily in this political environment that we're in. And then coming up with strategies that might allow us to be more responsive to this moment, and build power in a way that is effective in combating a tough political environment. And I think like some of the other things that I am fortunate to do is thinking about leadership development and capacity building. So a lot of our affiliates have staff who are maybe less experienced, or maybe they're really experienced, but they're in the thick of some tough stuff, and they need some partnership, like some thought partnership or coaching for kind of understanding their capacity, how they can grow, or like, yeah, coaching, peer coaching through some of the tough stuff is like someone to listen to, which, and in those moments I really feel like a social worker kind of helping folks talk through some challenges and helping them strategize with how to deal with them.
I guess two questions. How has that affected your work? And then what would you say to other social workers who, really want to get involved, but feel like opportunities are just dwindling or shifting too much and they can't catch up with them?
It's a really hard moment, I think, to have hope that there is something we can do, right? Um, and I've seen layoffs, I've seen a lot of things shift, um, national organizations and local organizations. And I've also seen everyone say, like, we have a changing government, and it's unclear whether democracy will survive, like all of these things. And my the like the comfort that I take in this moment is that there's always going to be a small, like a group of people who will come together to do things. So like maybe the institutions, for example, philanthropy, or um, big, big programmatic like nonprofits that do a lot of social services, like maybe those things are not what they used to be. Maybe they're not hiring. Maybe they've shifted their focus, and that can be really discouraging. And there are a lot of things that are being built out to respond to this moment. Um, there are a lot of people I've seen have a vision for what should be. I've heard people talk about Earth 1, Earth 2, and Earth 3. So Earth 1 is like the institutions and world as we knew it, where democracy was alive, but maybe didn't work for everybody. But it was sort of like the problems were under the surface, and you can kind of carry on with your institutions and your business as needed. Earth 2 is sort of the distortion, disruption, eroding of democracy, of like all of the institutions that we've come to know and rely on. Um, and then Earth 3 is the sort of like reconstructing post that. It's like rebuilding, reimagining, reconstructing something that works for everybody. And I think if you're in a social work, if you have social work training and you went to school under Earth 1, Earth 2 is really, really jarring. Earth 2 is like, wow, I don't know where I fit in. This seems impossible. And I think that there's a place for Earth 3, and perhaps it is not yet, not yet there, but there are roles for people to reimagine, reconstruct, and implement the vision for what should be. And if social workers could run things, like I'm sure that we would have there are three that we know. There is this moment where maybe social workers are like, I don't fit, I don't know. And I say like there are roles out there that require your brain to like reimagine and reconstruct what should be, whether they're like local government roles. I highly recommend social workers look at local government roles, because a lot of the resistance to an authoritarian regime is coming from the states and local levels, um, where states and cities are reimagining and providing for their people, um, and they are looking for mission-oriented, values-oriented people to implement and take charge, in this moment. So those are like some pieces of advice and, um, I don't know, th a way to look at things, because I don't think that there's any easy answer, but I think having an understanding of what the landscape is, having an analysis of it, and then deciding what your move should be. I think that's sort of the best I can do.
What would you say for social workers who might, okay, well, you took some classes in the public policy school and a couple classes in law school, but social workers who feel like, well, I need to go back and get a law degree or a public policy degree or my PhD in order to be able to move into a policy role or a more macro level position. What would you say to them?
I don't believe that that is a good, efficient use of time. The world needs you right now. So, like, if you are in a social work setting where you're a clinical social worker, perhaps thinking about the skills that you would want to develop to do what you want to do next. So, if you are a school social worker and you're like, I want to do something on the macro level. Well, what are the ways that your job interacts with the macro systems? So if you're a school social worker, chances are you're navigating state policy or district policy. Chances are you're also navigating, pedagogy and the way kids are taught. Chances are you might be navigating disability studies, right? Or even social safety net programs. Like, find ways where your job interacts with other macro systems and finding out like what can I learn more? And if I want to be an advocate, like what do I experience every day with the kids that I'm working with that I can like improve by just understanding it and being an advocate. And sort of, you don't have to know what your big plan is. I truly believe that that's a thing in life. You don't have to know what your big plan is at every minute, but you do have to understand like how can I get to where I want to be next by taking that first step. So like identifying that first step and doing that and seeing where it takes you, I think.
We talked a little bit about in the beginning when you first started looking for jobs, knowing that these jobs are not going to say social work across the top, they're not marketed for social workers. You likely won't even see the word social work in the job description at all. So where can social workers find policy related opportunities? Where do we start looking?
My first piece of advice is check your local government jobs. And you would be surprised. There's, often cities, states, counties have public health department. Like, that's a really great place to practice macro social work. They have health and human services. Sometimes they have a civil rights commission that has a staff. Even public budgets are like a great way to practice social work. Like, budgets are a moral document, and determining how resources are used, or it's like that's a great way for social workers to like engage. Um, looking at departments of education, so looking at school districts and thinking about more administrative positions. Um, so I would say, like, in theory, depending on the kind of social work education you came from, in theory, like you believe in a robust public public industry or public realm. So like starting there is like, well, what are the public institutions that I can be part of that I can like have a big impact? So public schools, community college districts, like that kind of thing. And then I would say like look at your nonprofit landscape. Um, Oftentimes like there's so many nonprofits, and Idealist does a good job of a lot of nonprofits post jobs to Idealist. Um, and that is how I have found one job out of several jobs that I've held. Um, so and oftentimes I think the best way to find a job is to like make connections with people who do what you want to do. Um, it's not necessarily that you're looking for a job opening, but that you are looking at people who might do what you think you might want to do. Um, I remember I uh, I have had coffees or whatever with people who they have jobs that I think are really interesting. For example, I really care about uh, building a robust public housing or social housing system in our cities and states in our country. And so I've like asked people to get coffee who run affordable housing nonprofits. And I don't want to work at an affordable housing nonprofit, but the skill of understanding how to manage real estate is a key thing that I'm like, well, I should learn about how they figured out how to do this, and see what I can learn about what I should do next. So yeah, so nonprofits, and then the other thing I would say is universities. A lot of the times universities have departments, student services. They have professors who do research that is robust and like helpful to the field. So figuring out how you can how you can get in there, and in some ways they create a lot of research and knowledge, but then the application of that is kind of lost on them. So also figuring out like how can you be, everybody wants their research to be useful. So finding researchers that study the thing that you care about most and figuring out who they're involved with, like how are they making their research useful? Who are they working with the public health department? Are they working with a doctor, a clinic that you think is cool? Are they working in schools? Are they working with teachers? Are they working with other clinicians? Um, so like finding out how they're making their research applicable to the real world, like I think that's a great job for social workers to help figure out. Um, yeah, and then there's also philanthropy. For some people, philanthropy might be great. I highly, I highly suggest if you want to understand the landscape of nonprofit institutions, of research, going to a big foundation is a good way to get a like bird's eye view of what is happening in different cities, regions in the country. You'll meet lots of different people that way. So those are like the places I would look if I were looking for a job right now.
Are there ways that you think social workers can start building macro level skills while they're in their current role, even if it's not really a macro role?
Yeah. I think again, I would say where is your current job interacting with macro systems? What are what are needs that maybe you can assess? So maybe it's like you're a family therapist and you're helping families navigate tough, economic times. Like what can you do? What can you do to be an advocate for your clients? What do you need to understand? So I think that's one thing, is like building an analysis and being able to like uh synthesize the experience you've had because that's useful to maybe like a legislator who's trying to advocate for reforms, um, or your mayor or your city council or something. So like interacting with government systems, I think is one way to do that as a clinician and helping to like people to understand your experience because half of that is storytelling and understanding where your story might be useful as you are kind of representing the needs of your clients. Um, I think another thing that I would say is some people who are clinicians might work for an organization that is unionized. So, like in a lot of places across the globe, labor is such a pillar for reforms and for progressive policymaking. And in the US, not so much because of lots of political things. But if you work for a school, you're probably you probably have access to a union. If you work in a hospital, you probably have access to a union. So like that is a realm of organizing that has a lot of potential. So like understanding how you are part of a system and kind of exercising your power outward. So maybe you use your union's position as as a way to build advocacy skills. Your union might say like we're gonna have a lobby day or whatever at the state legislature. Here's our agenda that we are asking for our legislature to endorse or to like make happen. Um, Getting involved through that way is also, I think, really helpful. Or it might be more policy oriented, where you're trying to shift maybe the university as an institution to incorporate some reforms. So I would say that, like, understand where there's potential for organizing, um, and how you can be a part of that, I think is another macro skill that is helpful.
If folks are watching this as we kind of wrap up here and they're thinking, wow, this is so inspiring, but I don't know that that could ever be me. What would you say to them?
I mean, we are social workers, right? So everybody has inherent value and worth. And no matter what space you're in, you have something to contribute. And you should extend that into the macro setting. And it's intimidating to think of it as like, oh, in this macro systems oriented way, but like think of how many systems you are a part of that your life interacts with. And in every system, you have something of value and of note to contribute. And being able to take a step back and see that, um, you belong there. And anything that you believe should happen, like is worth exploring and worth working toward. And you don't have to have all the answers. You just have to like know that your contribution matters and that you will do it justice. Like you will do what you need to do to make it correct or like make it effective or make it successful. And at the end of the day, like there isn't a finite end to making social justice happen, helping people get everything they need to survive. Like there's always, there isn't a finite ending. And so consider it like in Spanish, we say that el granito de arena, like you are contributing your little grain of sand to whatever you're hoping for, what the grand vision is at the end. And that matters because that's all any of us can do.
So I'd love to end just on a note about what you personally love most about working in policy.
I love the minute when you win something, and then it's like, that to me is like, that's where the real work starts, is like the implementation of the thing that you envisioned. And it is hard work. uh, to do that, and it takes a lot of negotiation with lots of different people. But that is practicing agency and self-determination is like getting to implement policies and programs that will help people and that will help you help society. Um, that is where to me, the real social work starts, is the implementation of what your vision is.
So where can people follow you, find out more about your work, or maybe even get in touch if they have questions and want to contact you?
Yeah, I'm searchable on LinkedIn, so I accept, messages from folks there. I do not have a lot of other social media ways, but I'm sure, Melissa, that if folks reach out, you can send them my way via email.
Yeah, okay, absolutely. I'd be happy to make that connection for anyone who wants to reach out to Christina. And again, I want to say thank you so much for sharing your journey and your insights with us today. For the rest of our viewers here, if you're a social worker thinking about expanding your impact beyond direct practice, we hope this conversation is helpful to you. So don't forget to like and subscribe, share with your colleagues, and we will see you next time.